Welcome to the Set to Lead podcast, the online mentoring platform for emerging and current leaders. My name is Marianne Samdi, leadership coach and talent development expert, and I will be your host. Welcome to the show, Clint.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Nice for you to be here. Today's show is going to be about project management. I thought we'd get started by you telling the audience about how you got started in the project management business.
It was a circuitous route, to say the least. I'm an electrical engineer by training and by education, and we had some projects when I was a Coca-Cola employee as an engineer. We had some projects that didn't go too well, and as a result, the boss's boss's boss, the engineering manager, got fired, and we decided we needed to get better at managing projects. So we brought in a company to help us do better, and we got better, and I saw the results and liked it so much that about 6 months later, I actually quit Coca-Cola and went to work for that company all those years ago. And I just really enjoy what I do. So project management is not what I went to school for, at least not initially, but it's my passion.
I think that's a lot of people's story in terms of they majored in something different than what they're currently doing.
Well, us electrical engineers, we like to say we can do anything. So,
yeah, exactly. So, why do you believe leaders should value project management?
I think it depends on what you consider a leader to be. I mean, for me, it's if your role is to grow your company's revenue or profitability or to make your customers happy, then I truly believe that project management can help you get there. Because I know people that have lost contracts, have lost customers because they couldn't reliably hit deadlines. And I remember one story where we had just gotten to work at this client site, and after being there for a few months, the sponsor pulled me aside and he said, "This is really great because I got an example of we lost one of our best customers because they said we couldn't depend on your ability to get to deliver on schedule, and now we have that ability, even though we can't go back and regain that customer." Or I've got another examples where contracts are written with $1 million a day liquidated damages clauses. So every day they're late, they pay $1 million a day. So if your job at the company as a leader is to make sure projects get done or that you don't lose customers or you add money to the bottom line, then this is a value added topic, as well as the people on your employees. Think about there's kind of two scenarios that your employees can have. One is always stressed out, always overloaded. The company's always launching too many projects. They don't have enough time to get all their work done. Or we actually take a proactive approach so we know who can do what and when. So people are, I won't say relaxed because their foot's always going to be to the floor, but they're not as stressed. It's not that gut wrenching, I hate my job when I go home at night kind of stress.
Mm-hmm. So that's pretty powerful there. If you're not into project management, and you miss deadlines, you lose money.
Exactly. I mean, there are some people that are nonprofits and maybe this doesn't apply, but the clients that I've been working with for my 30-year career, deadlines matter, money matters. We have one of our clients is a sponsor for the Summer and Winter Olympic Games and the FIFA World Cups. So think about how much money and time they invest in these projects, and they can't be late. They can't call up the International Olympic Committee and go, "Hey, you know what? We're running a little bit late. Can you move the Olympics for 3 months for us?"
Right.
So you've got to hit those timelines. You have to. Or if you're a power company and got $1 million a day liquidated damages in your contract, you don't have a choice. You've got to deliver on time.
Right. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen on projects that could have been avoided?
There's actually quite a few that come to mind right away. One is, I think that people don't have the ability, when I say people, project managers typically is who I throw into this category, they're very reluctant to say no. As human beings, we really want to please people. We want to say yes. We want to do the right thing. And our natural tendency is just to throw out a yes automatically when asked to do something. And in reality, what we probably should do is a lot of times we should say no. I think it's much better to say no in the beginning, that cannot be done the way you're asking for it, than to say yes for 6 months and then announce, "Oh, by the way, we're not going to make it." So don't be afraid to say no. I think that's one of the things that makes projects get sideways, is they didn't do the due diligence up front to realize they couldn't do it and then push back on the customer to say that we can't do that. It simply cannot work. And I think that, and I know people have this fear of doing that, but I think customers are smart and they want to know the truth. And while they're going to be disappointed with the answer being no, I think it's less disappointing to be able to say no up front, but here's what I can do instead and deliver on that, as opposed to saying I'm going to get it done and then not getting it done. So that's one thing is the inability to say or unwillingness to say no. Another one is kind of related. Companies have this tendency to over launch. We just throw out project after project after project, initiative after initiative after initiative. And we tell everybody, get it done, work harder, not smart, work smarter, not harder, all these buzzwords that go out there. But at the end of the day, if you're not looking at who you have available, what the workload is, what projects are being prioritized, because most companies that I'm familiar with, they have more projects than they have the ability to deliver. And yet they continue to throw out more projects all the time. Well, that's probably okay as long as somebody in the organization is prioritizing the project, saying, all right, look, I know that Joe can only get 10 things done. This is the 10 most important things I want to make sure that he focuses on. And I know that Mary Ann can only get 12 things done, but these are the 12 things that they really need to focus on. So somebody has to prioritize projects. So I think failure to prioritize, this desire to want to over launch. And then another one that comes to mind that are also kind of related is the project manager takes the approach of, everybody's really busy. Mary Ann's got 12 things on her list and Joe's got 10 on his list. Let me just help the team out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the plan together for them. And I've been around a while and I know the activities and I know how long it takes people. And so I'll just develop the plan for them. So that's something they don't have to worry about. And then I'll send it around by email saying if there's any feedback, let me know. Well, we both know that the feedback never comes because people are busy and they never actually look at it. And then when the project manager complains, hey, Mary Ann, you missed your deadline, Mary Ann says, what deadline? I didn't promise you that by that date. Where'd that number come from? I never told you that. If you asked me, I'd have told you that was unrealistic. And so I think people, they have this desire they want to jump right into things and not take the time up front to plan because they see it as a waste and not as an investment. And then they have this desire to say, let me help the team out. I know it all. I'll put it all together for them. And these are all things I think that really lead project work to fail. And the other one that kind of ties in all that as well is the idea behind clarity. This feeling that we believe everybody understands what the project is and what they need to work on. And that's a myth. There is no way if you have 15 or 20 people on the team that they all understand the project in the same exact way. And this assumption that we all understand is just a myth, and we need to get past that.
So you mentioned, the manager may have put the plan together for the team, sent it out via email and asked for feedback. Yep. Never got the feedback. So are you saying that part of an effective project plan is to collaboratively plan it together?
100%, Mary Ann. That's exactly what I'm saying. We believe as a company very strongly. We've been around for almost 40 years doing this stuff on some massive projects. We very strongly believe that no matter how much experience that project manager has or somebody on my team has, we are never going to be as good as the plan put together by the individual team members themselves. So we get everybody together in a room for 2 or 3 days and we plan these projects. Individual team members identify their tasks. I don't assign them. The project manager doesn't assign them. Joe and Mary Ann raise their hand and say, that's my task. Give me that one. And then Joe and Mary Ann can say, well, since that's my task, I'm going to need 8 days or 12 days or 4 days. And then they're going to say, and I can only start this task when Clint, Fred, and Joanne give me this information that I need to start my task. So together, they're building their plan for their project. And the reason this is so important and really powerful is most of the world today works in a matrix organization, meaning that as a project manager, while I'm responsible for delivering the project, I'm held accountable for that. The people don't work for me. The people on the team work for their functional managers. That's who gives them their pay raises and their job reviews. And they're just dotted line to my project. And oh, by the way, 5 other projects. So not only do I not control the people on my team, I'm competing for their time with others. So what that really means is the only way in the world I'm going to be successful in that environment, that scenario, is if the people on the team hold themselves accountable. well, what can you do as a project manager to have people hold themselves accountable? Let it be their plan. Because if it's their plan, if they said that's my task, and if they said I need 5 days, and if they said I can't do this until after Joanne finishes, then they have to own that task. You've removed all the excuses somebody can throw back at you, and now they own that task. And what we found in our history as a company, when we do that, people are committed to what they plan. People want to live up to what they said they were going to do. They're collaborative. They have ownership. They're bought into it. It really and truly becomes their plan. And so it's not about me having to hammer you and manage you. It's really about just working with you to say, when are you going to be done? You said you'd be done on Friday. Is that still realistic? And the other flip side of that also is, from a team-based approach, the team is putting together their plan, and they have to proactively manage that plan throughout the life of the project. So one of our tenets also is that I'm going to hold you accountable to the duration that you give me, because I'm going to hold you accountable to that. But you have the ability and, frankly, the right to change it later. So if you tell me today that the task is going to take you a week, 5 working days, but you don't know when it is yet because we haven't finished the planning process. It could be next month. It could be 3 months from now. But you say, well, I think in 5 days I ought to be able to find enough time to do that task, taking into account all my other work. But that task happens to fall during a week where you get called the jury duty, then we believe you have the right to change that duration to account for that time you're losing to jury duty, your training, or whatever those things are. So the other thing that I think people fail to understand is project plans are living, breathing documents. They are not cast in stone. It's not a one-time shot and you're done. It is a constant course correction that has to be made every week or every 2 weeks throughout the life of the project.
So Clint, what if a leader or a project manager says, Clint, I don't have the time for a 2 to 3 day planning session?
Then I would say that I'd ask the question honestly is, well, how have you been doing on your project so far? Have they all come in on time? And if they do hit the date, did they hit the date with the quality, all the functionality and the features they promised, or did a bunch of shortcuts get taken at the end? What I need to do is convince them that, listen, this is not a cost up front. This is an investment. We're going to invest 2 or 3 days of a team's time. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about, bigger projects, so 150 to up to 3,000 activities. So I'm not talking about a 10 activity project plan. Obviously that would not require that amount of detail, but most projects are going to be a 2 to 3 day range. And what we found is by doing that, in that 3 days, 2 things happen. First of all, the team builds a plan they can commit to. Mm-hmm. And they've agreed to do. And that's also going to help them understand, because they participate in the entire planning process. They understand why other people are waiting on them, how their work, if it gets delayed, affects those other people. They understand the conversations about why we're doing things a certain way and not a different way. But the other thing it does is, by having us establish this relationship together in those 2 to 3 days, we can then go virtual for the remainder of the project. I'm going to invest 2 or 3 days up front with the team. And then the other 18 months, we can do our weekly control calls, our weekly update meetings, our course corrections. We can do those on WebEx or Zoom or whatever tool we want to use. What I really need to do is, there's a book by Harvard Press called The Wisdom of Teams. And what it tries to figure out is, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? How do I take a group of individuals who have been assigned to my project and actually have them work and operate as a functional team? How does that actually work? And what they found was, in order to do that, place a structure within which people begin to feel accountable to each other, not just to the project manager, but to each other.
Right.
In my words, I like to say that I need to turn you from an email address into a living, breathing human being. And I'll give you an example of that. Let's say that you and I have worked together on projects for 10 years. And we work for Acme Corporation. And here at Acme Corporation, we have an Atlanta office where I work. We've got a New York office where you work. And while we've collaborated on projects, through email and text messages and Jira and collaboration tools, I actually never met you. So you're just an email address to me. And when I'm done with my task, I know that I email it to you, Marianne at acmecorporation.com, and you do some magic and the company makes money and we all win. Everybody's happy. So let's say that I'm a team member on 5 or 6 different projects, which would be very typical for a matrix organization. And I'm doing my 40, 50, 60, sometimes 60 hours a week. That's just typical. I'm putting my time in. But for whatever reason, this particular week, when my task is due for your part of the project, I'm not going to get it done. I mean, I already got 60 hours in this week. I'm running out of, I don't have the time to do it. So I think to myself, well, it's not like I'm not doing my job for the company. I'm working super hard. I'll just have to get to it it'll get done when I get it done. And let's say I deliver that thing 4 days late to you, and I finally get it done 4 days late, email it to you. Sorry, Marianne, here it is. And then all I know is the company made money. So I don't feel any pain. So I think there must be no problem with that. But now let's take the approach that I'm suggesting, which is we actually get together and plan this in a room face to face for 2 or 3 days. And over that time, oh, hi, Marianne, so nice to meet you. Finally, nice to put a name to a face. And over the coffee breaks, over those 2 to 3 days, over the team dinner we probably have, over this, 2 or 3 lunches, the 14 coffee breaks, all these different things, we begin to have conversations. And I get to learn about your kids. And you got a 15-year-old son. I got a 13-year-old son. Your son loves baseball. My son loves soccer, right? We have these conversations. And now you're no longer an email address to me. Now you're somebody that I have established some kind of a rapport with. In the planning session, I find that my task that I've always sent to you is on the critical path. And I don't want to bog us down in terminology, but if it's on the critical path, it just means that if I'm late, the project should be late. That's how it works. And I say, well, Marianne, that doesn't seem right, because I know for a fact I've been late on my task to you and the project still finished on time. So I think there's a misconnection here. And you say, well, no, Clint, this is actually right. The last time you were late, it was 4 days late to be exact. And I had to work 2 weekends in a row to make up for that, because I knew if I was late, the whole project would be late. And I didn't want that to happen. So you say, I had to work 2 weekends in a row to make up for that. Clint, I got to tell you, you were not very popular around my household for those 2 weekends, because I was working and I had to miss my son's baseball game and I had to miss my daughter's recital. And these are things I'll never be able to go back and share in again, all because I had to make up for your lateness. Well, I start feeling bad and I think, well, that's terrible. I would not want somebody to do that to me. So when I go back to Atlanta and you go back to New York, you're still Marianne at activecorporations.com, but now you're Marianne with 2 kids, a son 15 who plays baseball, and you can bet I'm putting pressure on myself the next time I have a task to make sure it gets done so that I'm not the reason you're late. I have turned you from an email address to a living, breathing human being. And when we establish those relationships in those first couple of days, we can do the rest of the project, 18, 24 months. We could do all remotely.
Understood. Listen, you're preaching to the choir. I totally agree with everything that you're saying. How important do you think it is for a project manager to be a great communicator?
Extremely important. I'd say it's probably one of the top skills that she or he might have. And if I might delve into this a little bit. So when I was researching my new book, and there was a chapter called Communicate Like a Person, Not an Emoji. And I was thinking, so I had the misunderstanding. I actually had the definition wrong in my head. I thought communication required a dialogue. And it turns out it doesn't. The textbook definition of communication, according to Webster, is just the act or process of using words to express or exchange information. So it doesn't have to be exchanged. It can just be expressed. So therefore, we can communicate through an email. We can communicate through a text message, through a post on Slack or some other collaboration tool. And that is actually communication. But anybody who's played that game when they were a kid called telephone, in the UK, I think they call it Chinese whispers, but where you've got like 5 or 6 people in a row and you whisper the secret in the first person's ear and they turn around and whisper it in the second person's ear. And what comes out of the last person's mouth is not remotely close to what got whispered in the first person's ear. And the reason is what they were doing was they were communicating 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, but what they were not having is a conversation. When you have a conversation, you're able to ask clarifying questions. You can say, well, do you mean go left or do you mean just go slightly left? Do you mean go to this direction? Do you mean do this? What does that word mean? Mm-hmm. Because when you ask clarifying questions to a conversation, now what you communicate to the next person is if not exactly, it's at least very close to what got communicated to you. Less things are open to interpretation. So I think conversation is so critically important when you're talking about project management. And I think one of the things a project manager has to have is this ability and willingness. Probably the key phrase here is the willingness to have these conversations. A lot of times what I find, and I'll play some stereotypes here, but I think there's a grain of truth in them. And I'll talk about engineers because I am one. Engineers, we have this reputation for being really good at math, and maybe people skills aren't so good. And I can tell you that my observation is that's probably true. I mean, we've got really good math skills, but we also tend to want to be left alone. We only want to be held accountable for ourselves. And I want to go off to my cubicle and design the perfect widget. And the problem is when I bring that perfect widget back to the team, the marketing person says, there's no market for that. I can't sell that. If you'd done this one thing differently, I could have sold 1 million of them, right? We need to have this conversation and force ourselves to work together, force ourselves out of silos. So I think you have to have a willingness to communicate, and you have to have the skills to communicate. And that means understanding what motivates Joanne might be different than what motivates Fred. Joanne might be motivated by putting pressure on her. Fred might be motivated by cajoling and joking and prodding. So it depends. I had a boss once who he yelled at everybody else, but he never yelled at me, because somehow he figured out if he yelled at me, we'd be done. Because I work really, really hard and I'm doing the best that I possibly can. And you yelling at me is not going to help. And he, for whatever reason, he figured that out. And so while he yelled at people around me, he never yelled at me. So he had figured out how to communicate to me. So I think communication is a crucial skill to have in project management. You have to figure out what's the best style to communicate with individuals. But the key is you have to be willing to have the conversation. And that means you actually have to force the conversation, because everybody's busy. Yeah. Everybody's off in their world. And now we have all these great collaboration tools like Zoom and Slack and all these things. And so that people say, oh, I'm communicating all day long. Okay, let me ask you this. Have you ever gotten an email from somebody and then wondered what the tone of the email was?
No.
That's a bad thing, right? So I've actually written an email to an employee and then followed up with a phone call later, and the employee was very upset. And they were upset because they misinterpreted the way I wrote the email. They said the tone of the email. There was no tone of the email. I just stated something. It wasn't meant in a derogatory way. It wasn't meant in a negative way, but they took it that way. Mm-hmm. Why? Because it's a one-way communication. It's not a dialogue. So I'm a big fan of forcing conversations, getting people together, making the people talk to each other, because we as human beings, we have this desire. I want to check something off my to-do list today. I got 73 items on here and I want to check 1 or 2 or 3 of them off today. So what is the easiest way to do that? Is if I get something done, or I think I'm done, and I shoot you a text saying it's done, or I send you an email saying it's done. What I don't want to do probably is pick up the phone and call you, because if I call you and actually speak with you, I might learn that I'm not done. And not only do I not have something checked off my list, I've got 3 more things added to it. And so people run away from conversations because they don't want to have them. And so therefore, in that leadership role of a project manager, you have to force the conversations to happen. And what you'll find, I promise you, is when you do that, as long as you're doing it in an effective way, they're glad they had the conversation afterwards. They just don't know they want to do it yet.
Oh, man, I totally agree. And when you say forced conversations, you're saying forced verbal conversations.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's easier to do that. I find I've had situations where I got 17 texts in a row. Fine, I picked the phone up and called. Look, let's spend 3 minutes to figure this out, rather than me having to type 17 responses to your text messages or 3 different emails. What do you want? What are you looking for? And just get it over with. But people are so quick they want to throw it over the fence.
So to continue on this path, we both know that certain kinds of stakeholders make projects difficult, hence some of the stuff you just spoke about. But let's go a little bit further with this. Let's talk about the best way to work with these difficult stakeholders. Okay. I'm going to mention a certain type of behavior, and you're going to share with the audience a tip on how to best work with that type of person. Does that work for you?
Absolutely.
Okay, here we go. First one, the stakeholder that can't clearly share the requirements of the project. And I'm talking about that stakeholder who can't describe the requirements at the beginning of the project when it first starts. How do you deal with that individual?
So usually what I do is I have a conversation. In fact, I do this on even very complex projects where we might be designing semiconductor chips or really highly technical things. I always start off by saying, let's just have a conversation. Just tell me in general terms, what is it that you're looking for? And then I'll ask pointed questions. And what I'm doing is in my head, I'm trying to understand exactly what he or she wants. And then when I think I got it, I'll articulate it back to them and say, so is this what you're thinking? And usually it's not quite right. But I keep pushing. But what I'm really doing is getting it in my head. And once it's in my head, then I can articulate it back to them in a way that they understand. So it's also about not getting too buried in the details. If I want to build a 3-bedroom house, I don't have to know on day one what color the carpet is. But I do need to know how many rooms there are, right? Those kind of questions.
What about the stakeholder that never meets their deadline? Or maybe I shouldn't say never. Typically, they don't. They don't take it too seriously, or at least that's their perception. How do you deal with them?
I would have to do some research to say, why don't they meet the deadlines? Is it like I described earlier, where they didn't participate? They were just assigned a date to which they're not really going to hold themselves accountable. Or do they not understand how they fit into the puzzle? So like earlier, I was the person making you late on the project, but I was putting in my 60 hours a week. So I'm not a bad guy. I just didn't understand that I was going to, if I made you late, the whole project got late. So really it's about understanding where one fits into the project overall, whether they're on the critical path. And then, why are you late? Are you participating in the planning process, or are you just being assigned a bunch of dates to which you're not really holding yourself accountable?
So let's say the project you're in the middle of the project. When is it too late to go back to planning? When is it too late to say, okay, now I want you to be a part of the date planning?
So for us, it's never too late. A lot of times we get called in to work on projects because they're in the ditch. They're in trouble and we need to help get them out of the ditch. They may be halfway through their supposed time on the project. So we always do the same thing. We say, all right, let's push the pause button and let's articulate clearly what the scope is. And what generally happens is the project manager will say, oh, we don't need to waste time doing that. We've been working on this thing for 4 months. Everybody knows what to do. And my response is always, okay, no problem. Just give me 30 minutes so I'll understand what the project is. And what ends up happening is we take the full 4 hours I was asking for in the first place because people have different opinions on what the project is. And that's one of the reasons we're in the ditch in the first place. The second reason we want to push the pause button and plan is we need to know whether or not we have a shot at getting the deadline. Maybe this thing is so far down the path that we're never going to make it. We should actually stop. Don't even continue on. Just leave the car in the ditch, go find a different car and drive on. Right? Let's pick a different project to go do because this one has no shot now of being successful. And so I would always say it's never too late to push the pause button, carve out, those 2 or 3 days. And now I have a realistic vision of whether or not we can even hit the deadline and people always say, oh, well, let's go ahead and finish it. Even though we know we're not going to make the date, so the customer won't need it anymore. So we're not really going to get revenue, but man, we got 6 months invested. Let's just push it across the finish line and we'll put it on the shelf. Maybe somebody can use it later. And my response is always the same. So you telling me you want to waste 4 more months of team's time after 6 months of wasted time? I don't think so. Let's put those 4 months somewhere else.
Right. What about that stakeholder that doesn't come to meetings?
I'm going to put that pressure back on the project manager once again, because maybe he or she is set in an environment that's not respectful of other people's times. So one of the things that we always coach on is you want to get your control meetings, these update meetings, down to 1 hour or less per project. And if we can do that, if I know there's an agenda, and I know that if I'm 5 minutes late, I miss out on my opportunity to say something about a problem. Too bad you weren't here. We started without you because we're respectful for the other 29 people in the room, right? So we know that we're going to, in every single planning, in every single update session, these meetings, we're going to ask you to communicate what the status of your tasks are. And then we're going to see what the impact is on the project plan. And where there's probably going to be lateness associated with that update. And we're going to get that slippage back out, that lateness back out. We're going to do that every single time, the exact same way, every single place, 1 hour or less. People will come to your meetings once you do that. What they don't want to do is you show up on time and we're waiting 20 minutes for somebody else to show up. So what, my 20 minutes wasn't as important as this other person's 20 minutes? So right. I think once you establish those boundaries and that structure, people will respect you and they'll start coming.
I've noticed also some other ideas that people have leveraged, or I've seen leveraged, is some people, maybe they have several meetings going on a day. They can't dedicate the hour or the 30 minutes, so they'll send in their status where someone could read it for them, or they come at the start of the meeting and then ditch out towards the middle.
Right. So there's a couple of things buried in there. One is I probably am okay with sending a coworker to report, as long as that person understands the project. And when we get into the compression, so basically if I'm 4 days late and I made the project 4 days late, if I'm part of the solution, if I'm the coworker that came to the meeting, am I going to have the knowledge to help us get that 4 days back or not? That's one concern. And then the other one is when people just come to the front end of the meeting and then bail, then what am I going to do if they're the reason the project is late? So I think it's understanding, how they fit into the plan. Right. So what might be better, I think, in that situation is that they know they can't make the meeting. Then how about give me, 20 minutes before the meeting at some point, either a day before or the morning before. Let's put your stuff in and see if it's going to affect negatively, and then send your coworker that can come in just in case something happens.
Good point. What about that stakeholder that never replies back to emails?
Again, I just go down the hallway, tap them on the shoulder. I make them talk to me. I'll call them relentlessly. I mean, I won't take no for an answer. So you don't want to respond to emails? That's fine. I'm going to get up, walk down the hallway. I'm going to call you. I'm just going to bug you until you answer my phone call or you respond to my message.
Do you ever feel resentful when you have to keep badgering them?
I don't. I've had projects where this was a huge project. We had over 25,000 activities in the project plan. It was a 5-year program. And at the end of year 2, I still had people that I had to go hunt down. And it became, to them, it was almost like a game. And I didn't really care as long as I got the detail that I needed for the meeting. So if that was the hurdle they wanted me to jump through, then I was going to jump through it because it was important to me to get the project done. But if I thought somebody was being disrespectful or, just trying to do that to hurt the project, then that was a different story. And I would have to raise it with the sponsor. But generally, I find people want to do the right thing. And you got to figure out where they're coming from. Why are they not coming to the meetings? Why are they not responding to your emails? And if I had to guess, one reason people don't like to respond to emails is they have bad news and they don't want to tell you the bad news.
Okay.
And so you got to go figure out what that bad news is. And so one of the things we like to talk about is set the expectation that bad news is expected to happen in a project, and it's okay. What is not okay is bad news you've known about for 6 months and haven't said anything about. Because every day you don't share that bad news with me, it's one less day I have to fix the problem. So I know bad news is going to happen in projects. It's just the way the world works. And that's okay. I expect it to happen. I don't say I look forward to it, but I know it's going to happen. But what I want is people to feel comfortable telling me, hey, that vendor just told me they're going to be 3 weeks late. And what's my response going to be to that? Am I going to yell at them because the vendor's going to be 3 weeks late? Or am I going to say, well, that's really too bad. Let's see what everybody else has got going on, put it all together, and let's see what the impact is on the project. And if it's negative, then we together as a team will make the decisions to get that time back. And I think if you do that, people will start to respond.
Thanks for sharing that. I never thought about it in that perspective, that one possible reason someone may not reply is because they have bad news. That was good.
Yeah, we have a concept called shifting the worry curve. And that's one of the things that happens is people, they don't want, if you get behind on a project, you avoid your team. You don't want to talk to your coworkers because you hope that they don't bring the project up. And if they do bring it up, let's be honest, what you secretly hope is they're more late than you are, because that's what you want is somebody else to be more late.
Right. I have one last one. The stakeholder who has no room to flex their perspective or expectations.
This is probably the toughest one you've asked me, and that's because it depends on where this person fits in the hierarchy. Mm-hmm. If the stakeholder that refuses to flex is the customer or the senior VP, then I'm probably in trouble because I can't fix that, right? I mean, I need them to listen to what I have to say. And if they're asking me to build the flux capacitor and put it in the DeLorean and go back in time, and they're not willing to listen, then I'm not going to win. I'm not going to be successful in that environment. If, on the other hand, they're just a team member this is happening with, then again, I always say, where are they? What is that person coming from? What's in their head? And I go talk to them and say, hey, so I know you think we should go left, but everybody else on the team thinks we should go right. And here's why we think we should go right. And in project work, what we really strive for isn't necessarily 100% agreement. We do strive for group consensus. And group consensus says, if I'm the person who wants to go left and everybody else on the entire team says we should go right, Group consensus says, I will agree to support you in going in the wrong direction because you didn't change my mind. I still think we should go right and you want to go left, which I believe is wrong, but I will at least help support you in moving in that direction. And if I can't even get that dialogue to happen, then I'm going to have to go to the functional manager or the sponsor and see if I can't get this person replaced on the project team because I need them out of the way.
That's excellent. Just so what I got from that is we don't need to all agree.
No, I mean, that's ideal. That's perfect world, but nobody lives in the perfect world. We have to agree to move in the same direction, regardless of our personal thoughts.
Right. This was a pleasure for me, Clint. I learned a lot in this session.
Thanks, Marianne. Same here.
Before we go, moving forward, how can the audience follow you and your work?
So the easiest way is just Clinton M. Padgett, my name, clintonmpadgett.com. Mm-hmm. Or you can go to my website for my company, which is projectsuccess.com.
Excellent. Thanks for stopping by today, Clint.
My pleasure, Marianne. Thank you.
You're welcome.